Hello Wargamers! With Games Workshop's renewed interest in providing content that the community has been asking for a long time, things that advance the storyline, things that were previously wishlisty type of armies like Custodes and Sisters of Silence, I figured now would be a great time to talk about what might be in a codex that I've been looking forward to for a long time. That codex? Tau Allies. All right, before we begin, I want to say thanks for watching, and if you're new to the channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and also hit that little notification bell. That way, every time I put out a video, you'll be notified and not miss a beat. And while you're at it, head on over to Tactica Imperialis. If you haven't checked out his channel before, he does a lot of great stuff, including things based on fluff, things based on gameplay, just a really well-rounded 40K channel, and he does a lot of stuff on Tau too. So if you like my channel, you'll definitely like his as well. And I also have a video coming out with him today, the first in a couple of videos that he and I will be working on together. So go ahead, check out his channel, and subscribe there as well if you haven't already. So, all right, on to what we might see in a potential Tau Allies Codex, or a supplement, or a army list, or anything like that that we might see races other than the Tau reflected in. Now, this is something that people have been looking forward to for a long time, because the Tau Empire is made up of many races, many different species that they have encountered as they spread the greater good across the galaxy. And while their reach is limited, they've been able to encounter a lot of different people, a lot of different species, a lot of different technologies, and incorporate them into the Empire and bring them into the fold. Sometimes willingly and sometimes not willingly. So there's a rich fluff that we can draw lots of different novel ideas from, and that's really exciting for me and for a lot of Tau players. So let's think about what we might see in that potential codex. Now, I think probably the easiest way to do this is go from things that we are least likely to see to the things that would almost certainly be in a Tau Allies Codex. So starting on the wish listy side of things, on the least likely side of things, are the Tyrolean Dog Soldiers. Now, Tyrolean Dog Soldiers are a mercenary race. Their homeworld was destroyed by High Fleet Moloch, which shares a name with the amulet of Arthas Moloch of Farsight Enclave's fame. But they are a displaced race that has fought as mercenaries for lots of different entities, including the Imperium in the past. However, due to some bad blood between the Imperium and Tyrolean Dog Soldiers, they now are almost exclusively found outside of the Imperium, and that means in part in the Tau Empire. Now, I don't think that we would see Tyrolean Dog Soldiers in a Allies Codex, because there's just not a lot of stuff to go on there. If they were to develop more fluff, or something that made the Tyrolean Dog Soldiers unique aside from their looks, which on that note, you can look in some of the old rule books for Dangerous Xenos, and the Tyrolean Dog Soldier is one of them. So some great older art belongs to the Tyrolean Dog Soldiers. But aside from that, they don't have a lot that really sparks the imagination or really gets anything going. So I don't think that they would be incorporated into a Tau Codex or a Tau Allies Codex, just because they don't have a new angle or a new mechanic that really jumps out based on what we know about them so far. So maybe if Games Workshop embellished their current storyline a little bit, we could get some interesting mechanics, but as is, there's nothing that's really compelling to include them in a Tau Allies Codex. Slightly above them, slightly more interesting than Tyrolean Dog Soldiers, are Guvesa, which are humans that were left over from the Damocles Gulf Crusade, that are now part of the part of that Tau Empire. So basically, Imperial Guard came in, abandoned these planets as the Tau advanced, and the people that were left behind became part of the Empire, started fighting for the greater good. And I think we might be able to see those in a Tau Allies Codex, but it's probably unlikely just because really they would just be guardsmen, right? And that's not necessarily that interesting. They don't offer a new game mechanic for the Tau. They could serve serve well as a bubble wrap unit, basically just guardsmen, right? They're not going to really fit the Tau design of firepower and highly advanced technology, anything like that. Guard are kind of just shooty and have lots of numbers. So a bubble wrap unit would be what I would expect from them. You could give them access to some heavy weapons, right? That could be part of their role, like if some of them had access to missile pods. But that mechanic has now been brought into Fire Warrior teams with turrets. So again, I don't see that being a compelling reason to bring Guvesa into the potentially new Tau Allies Codex. But there is so that's kind of like the bottom tier of things that we're probably not going to see. We wouldn't see in a Codex. But then there's this mid tier of things that, yeah, there's a fair likelihood that we could see them. Things like the Nikasar, which are a race of psychers that help pilot some Tau vehicles through the warp. Now, the Tau themselves don't have access to warp technology, but the Nikasar are an allied race that can provide some warp capabilities. And so if we were to bring them into a Tau Allies Codex, it could allow Tau access to a psyker, which I don't think is going to happen, because again, it goes against the grain of the Tau Empire as it is currently conceptualized. We don't have psychers in Tau Empire armies because we have this overwhelming technology to rely on. We don't need psychers in a Tau Empire army from a gameplay perspective. But they could also do some sort of small flyer, some type of scout flyer, because the Nikasar also provide scouting vessels to the Empire. And so maybe think about this as kind of like a Storm Talon. We could maybe see a Storm Talon-like flyer for the Tau. Now, in the Forge World range, we have Remoras, which are similar, but So maybe we would have a Nikasar version of a Remora, and that wouldn't be the first time that a Forge World unit has been displaced by a new release from Games Workshop proper. So that's what I could see from them. Either a Psyker, which I don't think is likely, or a small flyer. In that same tier are the Demiurge, which are basically space dwarves, not squats, slightly different. But the Demiurge are a race of space miners, basically. They're short, stout little guys that mine. And they support the Earthcast, and we could see them doing something maybe like a transport flyer. If the Demiurge are meant to be hauling loads of minerals around the galaxy, it makes sense that they might have access to something like a transport flyer or some sort of troop transport that would be of use to the Tau. So we could see the Demiurge provide that in a battle role. We might also see the Demiurge reflected not necessarily in a direct unit, but in war gear. This might be an opportunity for a Demiurge to provide some sort of special ion weapon technology for a Tau Allies Codex. And finally, we could potentially see the Demiurge providing some sort of short-range, high-durability unit. Again, this goes a little bit against the grain with the current conceptualization of the army, but I could think of Demiurge being like little Graf Centurions, something that has short range, high durability, that we could almost conceptualize in a mining situation, like some sort of repurposed mining tool, which would be kind of cool. Alternatively, we could see some sort of unit that has some special rule on deployment or maneuverability of other units that somehow manipulates the terrain, like the Warscaper drone in the Farside Enclaves, but different. That would be interesting. And so the Nikasar and the Demiurge are two units that or two races that I think have a fair chance of being included in any potential Tau Allies Codex, but wouldn't be a shoo-in. You know, the Demiurge have a couple ships from the old Battlefleet Gothic range from Forge World, and so that makes them not out of the question for inclusion in a codex. Now, the third tier, basically the shoo-ins for a Tau Allies Codex, are the things that we already have in the Tau Codex, Vespid and Kroot. But if you were to make a whole codex out of it, you would need to expand those units. You need to have more than what's in the codex currently. So from Vespid, I think we would need to have a new model anyway. The old Vespid Stingwing models are out of date. You know, they're fine cast now, but they're still not very good models. They're great for the time, but with the current range, they are showing their age. So if we were to get a new Vespid model, it probably would be a plastic dual kit, would be my guess. So we could have the Stingwings as they are currently implemented in the game, maybe with some slight tweaks to make them actually competitive or somehow usable in an army. That means either increasing their toughness, increasing their points efficiency, so making them cheaper, or making their weapons have a longer range. I think any of those three things would make Vespid Stingwings more usable today and would be a likely, well, not necessarily likely, but a good choice on any author for a future Tau Allies Codex. Now, like I said, if we were to have new Stingwings, I would expect a dual kit, because that's kind of the thing that Games Workshop does now with a lot of their kits, is have them be multiple units. So what would be the counterpart to the Stingwings be? Well, I could see it basically being a similar, you know, body type as a Stingwing, but giving it potentially greater mobility, so having some sort of special rule that allows it to maybe act like a jet bike instead of a jump pack, or, you know, roll 3d6 instead of 2d6 for thrust moves, something like that. Make it a little bit more mobile with a longer range weapon that's weaker. So almost like a Tau version of an Elder jet bike, but not quite. I think that's kind of a logical step for Vespid. And then finally we get to the Kroot. And the Kroot, you know, this is kind of low-hanging fruit because the Kroot are an essential part of the Tau fluff, and they've been incorporated from the very beginning and have been reflected not only in 40k but also in Battlefleet Gothic. And so the Kroot are a great part of the Tau army that would absolutely be in a Tau Allies Codex, if not their own codex altogether. And we have tons of inspiration for this from the old chapter approved Kroot army list. Now, if you haven't seen my video talking about the old chapter approved Kroot army list, check out the link below. I'll put a link down there. You can watch that. But there's tons of units that were in that chapter approved that we could actually incorporate it into a Tau Allies Codex. Now, it would make it pretty lopsided in favor of the Kroot as opposed to these other races. Nonetheless, I think they would be valuable inclusions. So, again, the Kroot would potentially get a new kit. The current sculpts are still good, still a good model. They don't have the same problems that the Vespid do because they are plastic, and they came with plenty of other bits and different poses and things like that. So it's not absolutely necessary that we would need to get a new Kroot kit. But if we did, I bet that we would have it split between Kroot Carnivores and something called Kroot Hawks, which basically are flying Kroot that have eaten enough birds that they have grown wings and adapted in that way. So that would be a cool dual kit, is Carnivores and Kroot Hawks, or Hawk Kroot. And again, check out the chapter approved link below for what they would do, but they would basically be jump pack infantry, except for Kroot. Hounds, I think, would be an interesting component to include in every Kroot unit. So instead of having Kroot Hounds be their own unit entry or upgrade for Kroot carnivores, I think it would be interesting just to have them with any Kroot unit regardless of its type. So Kroot carnivores, Kroot ox, anyone can just take Kroot hounds on top of it. And then another really interesting Kroot unit that is mentioned in the chapter approved and also used to be a Forge World unit are Gnarlock Riders. So Gnarlock Riders are awesome. Basically, they're mounted Kroot, and they're not the same as Kroot Hawks, but they're more like cold ones from fantasy. So you have mounted Kroot, and they could take a variety of weapons, but serve more of a mobile Kroot multi-wound role. And again, they could have hounds with them, which would be cool. I could see that kit having an option for a mounted Kroot Shaper and also a standalone blister pack for a standing Kroot Shaper. I think would be really cool. Something more dynamic than the current model. And we could also see things like old name characters like Angkor Proc, who was a Kroot Shaper that was released for Games Day 2004 maybe? I don't remember. But awesome model. It's my Kroot Shaper that I use as just a normal Kroot because I don't take Shapers, but I'd love to see him implemented in a Kroot Allies or a Tau Allies Codex because the dude's awesome. One of my favorite characters from the Tau fluff. But those are all things that I could imagine seeing in a Tau Allies Codex. Now, one of the things that makes Tau Allies interesting or unique in the current Codex is that they don't have access to supporting fire rules. You can do supporting fire for them, but they don't do supporting fire themselves. And I think the tenuous relationship between some of these races and the Tau Empire would warrant their own version of the supporting fire rule, not in terms of actually being supporting fire, but some sort of rule that would make them interact in unique ways with Tau or other armies. So some sort of leadership bonus or strategic placement or maneuverability element associated with allying with Tau, but then maybe for things like Uvesa or Tyrolean Dog Soldiers, if they for some reason were in there, maybe they don't have access to that because Uvesa, some of them like the Empire, or at least they report that they like the Empire, but other ones kind of like are just there because they don't have a choice. So maybe they're not going to respond as kindly to protecting the Empire as more dedicated allies like Kroot and Vespid. So that might be interesting. That might be a type of special rule that we see for this codex that we wouldn't see in other codices. So that's kind of my rundown, some thoughts on what we might see in that codex, ranging all the way from the extremely unlikely Tyrolean Dog Soldier to the absolutely certain Kroot Carnivore Squad and likely other Kroot variants. So thanks for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I'm sure you guys have tons of your own ideas about what types of units might be included in a Tau Allies Codex. Or you might think that it's complete hogwash and not going to happen. But either way, let me know in the comments below. And of course, thanks for watching and happy wargaming.